Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thorough Newspaper Analysis, which is brought to you by LawSeco. So, today we have the analysis for 29th and 30th November, that is yesterday, Sunday, and for today. So, we will be discussing three major articles. The first one is from the Hindu. The Paris Agreement is no panacea. Basically, it talks about the Paris Agreement, which in the current scenario is considered to be the largest international, convergence on climate change, wherein we discuss about mitigating the climate change. But the various loopholes that are there in the Paris Agreement have been discussed in this article. Secondly, farmers' big concern and what government could negotiate. Now, as we know that the farmers have again come to the streets and roads protesting against the farm bills. But of all the three farm bills, one has been mostly contested. So, what are the causes and what are the repercussions regarding that? We'll be discussing in this article. And thirdly, justice on trial, which is from the Indian Express again. This basically talks about the bail provisions that are available in our country under the criminal procedure system and even in the civil system, basically the provision of bail, and how much is it necessary that every individual, irrespective of his all the credentials, is given bail, or is at least considered for that matter. And fourthly, we have the news and flash column, wherein we'll be discussing the small and crisp news points that are more important for our prelims exam. So, if in case you're also preparing for the judicial services examination, you can definitely have a look at the Lord of the Courses, which is LawSeco's Judiciary Test Prep course. The link to this course is available in the description box given below. And from the very link, you can download free study material as well. Also, we would like to inform you that now the PDF of this very discussion, the slides is available in our Telegram group. So the link to that Telegram group is also available in the description box. Also, the links to our WhatsApp as well as Facebook group is also available, so you can check them too. With this, let's see that what is the multiple choice question for the day. A new species of lizard, smallest known in the Indian gecko kind, has been discovered in which part of India? So we'll be discussing that today as well. Western Ghat, Eastern Ghat, Satpura, or Chota Nagpur Plateau. So if you know the answer, you can write down in the comment section below. So this is the descriptive question for the day. What are the implications of USA withdrawing from Paris Accord or the Paris Agreement, which we'll be discussing today? Explain. With this, let's start with the first article, which talks about the loopholes that are there in the Paris Agreement. Recently, US had withdrew from the Paris Agreement. Firstly, let me tell you that what actually the Paris Agreement is. So as we know that climate change has been a severe problem for the whole world since many years. So every now and then, time and again, there have been various international meetings, conventions, and agreements wherein various countries have come together and they have decided to mitigate the climate change and to save and safeguard the environment. Amongst them, like we have the Rio de Janeiro summit, which was one of the most famous summits, which was there in Brazil. Then we have the Kyoto Protocol of 1997. And then in the similar line, we have the Paris Agreement as well. Now, let's understand as to what kind of global cooperation is seen in the field of climate change. So the time between Stockholm Conference, which was 1972, and Rio de Janeiro Conference, which was 1992. So in this time period of 20 years, mounting of scientific evidence about the role of anthropogenic emissions in global warming. So basically, as we know that after 1972, there was a huge influx of industrialization in most of the countries in the world, and there was huge use of automobiles and transportation systems, due to which various anthropogenic activities. Now, basically, by anthropogenic we mean those activities which are related to the act of human. So the human-related activities had increased the emission of carbon or greenhouse gases to a very large extent in the environment, due to which the pollution levels had risen severely. Then it led to numerous political initiatives. So also to curb this very system of this huge emission of carbon gases and similar greenhouse gases, a lot of political initiatives were taken. And even if we talk about India as well, so our former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, she at the Stockholm Conference declared that poverty is the worst polluter, and that is why the huge Andolan called as Garibi Hatao Andolan was also brought into picture. But lately it has not really seen to reap a lot of benefits, if at all we talk about in the environmental sector. But yes, at least some initiatives were taken in our country as well. So then the Rio de Janeiro or the Rio Declaration led to the adoption of UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Now the very famous UNFCCC, which we discuss at large. So the Rio Declaration, which was there in 1992, it basically led to the adoption of the UNFCCC, which was the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So the basic idea behind this was balancing right to development of developing countries and obligation of developed countries. Now, one thing that we need to understand here is that by the time the UNFCCC, or in a way, if we talk about even the Rio Conference of 1992, by this time, what had happened was that some countries in this world had actually already become developed countries, like if we talk about USA. So USA had always had, best of the technologies, best of techniques, machines, industries, manufacturing, etc. And that is why USA had an easy hand in exploiting the various resources that the earth has gifted us. That is why, using these resources, countries like USA had already become developed countries. But of course, a lot of countries, let's take example of India itself, at this very time of 1992, we were really struggling to bring back our economic setup, as we know that the reforms of 1991 took place in the same time period. Now, in such a scenario, if we take example of India or most of the other countries which were there in the world, they were still and even still are developing countries. So that is why definitely they need more input and they need to use more resources from the earth, and hence the carbon emissions coming from such countries would also tend to increase. In such a scenario, there was a point that was brought in that all the countries should be equally responsible for mitigating the climate change or for reducing the emission of the greenhouse gases. But then, on an egalitarian or an equal, on an equal basis, it was considered that those countries like USA that have already exploited the Mother Earth to so much of extent, and the countries that are yet to use the resources which they were at least, gifted by the Earth, definitely they cannot be put on the same level. And the countries that are developed have to have more responsibility of mitigating the climate change as compared to the countries that are still developing and struggling with the basic needs of their people. So in such a scenario, the balancing right to development of so the right to development of the developing countries was recognized, and the obligation of the developed countries was also brought into picture. So then there was a distinction drawn between the luxury emissions and survival emissions. I'll give you a very simple example to it. For example, there is an industry that runs in a poor country or a developing country for that matter. Now, a lot of people are dependent on this industry, firstly, for employment. Secondly, for the regional development of that area. Thirdly, for the whatever produce goods or services are coming out of that manufacturing sector. Now these all emissions that would be made or that would come from this particular industry, these are not luxury emissions. That is, the emissions are in the category of survival, which means that very gases coming out of, or the very pollutants that are being emitted by this industry are done when the industry is running to meet the basic needs of the people. But on the other hand, let's take an example wherein one particular family of the United States has 4 members, and every member has his own automobile or own motor vehicle, and they use it all separately, and they emit the greenhouse gases in the environment. Now, in such a scenario, this is not something which is survival emission. This is obviously they're making the use of the luxury that is available to them, and that is why a distinction was made, and a kind of obligation or a kind of stoppage was given to the luxury emissions, and promotion was given to the survival emissions in the contrast. Then a huge financial package to develop environment friendly technologies in developing countries. Now still, as we know, even today we are trying to recycle plastic, and we are trying to do whatever steps that are necessary for developing such technologies which are environment friendly in nature, like for example CNG auto rickshaws and CNG taxis and buses that we have in India currently, even electric vehicles for that matter. So then we had the Conference of Parties in Berlin in 1995. Basically, the entire chronology of these international conventions with regard to the environment protection has been given this article. So if we talk about the COP, which was the Conference of Parties, which was there in Berlin 1995. So developed countries backed off from their commitments and made determined efforts to impose mandatory cuts on developing countries. So it was at the time of 1995 through Conference of Parties, wherein the developed countries actually refused to take care of their responsibility and they tried to put the entire burden on all the developing countries, which obviously was not something that should be entertained. Then in 1997, straight 2 years after this, Kyoto Protocol took place in Japan and it enshrined the Rio Principles. So the Rio Principles, which were there in, as you can see, 1992. So they were brought into picture by the Kyoto Protocol in 1997, and through this protocol, they fixed the emission targets for developed countries. Now, as we know, that Kyoto Protocol is very famous protocol if we talk about the carbon emissions. So it actually fixed the amount of emission that could be made by the developed countries, and it was never ratified by the US Congress, and then US withdrew its support from 2001. Because see, countries like USA that hugely depend on its industries and manufacturing sectors for strengthening its economy, so they know that the activities that we are already involved into are causing a lot of environmental loss. And if at all we become a member of protocols such as the Kyoto Protocol that try to fix the emission targets for a country, definitely America, as in USA, would also be restricted to make use of its industry and other kinds of resources that it has been provided by the nature. And in such a regard, their economy would definitely be hampered as well. And thus, that is the very reason that developed countries like USA every now and then try to pull out from such protocols or international conventions. And then in the Copenhagen Accord in 2009, it was engineered by US and China, and it was basically brokered by India and Brazil. So US, China, India and Brazil were the main parties that actually brought Copenhagen Accord into action. And the argument that was given was that the Global Climate Action Plan would be possible only if all reductions were made voluntarily, and that is why no kind of impositions should be made on a country. Rather, the countries should voluntarily contribute in reducing the carbon emission. But then again, obviously, all of us can understand that how many countries would really work in the direction of voluntarily cutting down the carbon emissions unless any restriction is made on that particular country. But yes, that was the very argument given through the Copenhagen Accord. So now this was the Paris Agreement of 2015, wherein fundamental change took place as to the Rio Principles. So now in 2015, it required all the parties to put forward their best efforts. Now, as we know, you might have already heard about the NDCs, which are the nationally determined contributions. So basically, every country who is a member of the Paris Agreement, it accords to itself, or depending upon the entire agreement that has been made, there are some nationally determined contributions, as in the country at the national level at large would be making some contributions in a particular direction to save the environment. And this actually moved away from the principles of common but differentiated responsibilities. Now, here, this had to be kept in mind that it was a common responsibility of all the countries, yes, but the responsibility is not equal for all the countries, because as the country which is already very poor and it needs to exploit the nature for the betterment of its own people, and a country that has already been exploiting the nature and emitting carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases for years now. So the responsibility and the share of both the countries can definitely not be equated, which should really have been taken care by the Paris Agreement. But it did not really recognize this point, and the report regularly on their emissions and implementation efforts. So there is no penalty, so they just have to, the countries only have to given their reports from time to time, but there is nothing, no provision like what if they're not able to meet the particular benchmarks that they had already agreed to. So that is why it needs to become more stringent and also more responsible towards various developing and underdeveloped countries. So here, a way forward has also been given that at 1.5 degrees Celsius, 70 to 80% coral reefs would die, and that is why we need to, lessen down the global temperature by more than 2 degrees at least. And the technology will not work unless living pattern is altered, and we need to shift from nationalism and parochialism to collaborative responses. So that is why we need to work in collaboration and coordination to make this world a better place to live. With this, let's discuss the next article, which talks about the farmer protest and FPTC. We'll discuss this in very short, since this entire issue has again risen up. That is the very reason why we have taken this article. But we have discussed it at length now, so we'll not be taking it into very deep, depth this time. So, as we know that the three main farmer bills, or the agriculture bills, or the farm reform bills, for example, or the agriculture reform bills, the Farmer Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Act is the most contested one, and there is the biggest opposition is against the FPTC Act. Now let's see that why is the FPTC Act the one that is most opposed to. Basically, the FPTC Act permits sale and purchase of farm produce outside the APMC mandis. Now, as they know, that APMC mandis are the Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee. So basically, these mandis were already, now you must have known, we call them as the Anaj mandis. So earlier, what used to happen was that the farmers, with their produce, they used to move to these APMCs, from where the government or whosoever had to, these contractors or these people used to procure or buy the grains. But now a freedom, in the words of this act, at least it has been said that leverage or a freedom has been given to the farmers now, that it's no foundation that they need to sell their produce or the agricultural produce or food grains in the APMCs or through APMCs alone. Rather, they can move out of these APMCs also and can sell it to any private individual as well. But the very thing is that such trades shall attract no market fees, cess, or levy under any APMC or state law. And the issue is that the right of center to enact legislature on agriculture markets. Now, the very thing that has been contested here is that these laws have been brought in by the parliament, that is the center. But the state governments contend that such matters fall into the state list, and thus the center is not really equipped and empowered to frame laws in this direction. Now, they say that according to Article 256 of the Indian Constitution, entry 15, that is agriculture, and entry 28, which is markets and fairs, they both fall under the state lists. But entry 42, which is union list, includes interstate trade and commerce. Basically, the central government has exploited, or in a way it has used entry 42 of its union list, which covers interstate trade and commerce. But maybe if at all it moves to the court and the decision is taken, maybe the very legislation, the very doctrine of colorable legislation is applied to this, because see, it might be, in some or the other way brought under the ambit of entry 42, but clearly entry 15 agriculture and entry 28 markets and fairs clearly fall under the state list, and thus on the forefront, the central government should not be really equipped to frame laws in this direction, but they have actually done it. So that is why the experts say that there is a difference between marketing and trade, they say, begins only after the produce has been marketed by the farmer. And that is why the central government says since it has, if the entry 42 has only trade, the word trade, but not market. So that is why they should not include into any procedure wherein marketing is going on by the farmer, which in this case it had to be, it actually goes on that the farmer actually markets his produce. And that is why the central government has misused, or in a way it has got a confusion with it has actually used marketing and trade interchangeably, which actually should not be the case. With this, let's see the third article for the day. We have actually discussed this article as well, but let's see. There are some very good facts in this article today. So it's about the bail regime and the reforms that are needed in the bail granting system in our justice system. So the speed at which Arnab Goswami, as we know that this is also a much contested and debated case now. So the speed at which this Arnab Goswami, who is a TV anchor for Republic TV, was recently granted bail, has thrown into sharp relief the multitudes for whom such quick access to justice will never exist. Now, because many were also discussing the case of Siddique Kapan, who was another journalist who was detained on his way to Hathras while he was going to cover the Hathras incident and the the survivors and the victims, the victim family and everyone. So he was actually detained under the UAPA Act, and he has still not been granted bail. And it is like a matter of a lot of days now. But Arnab Goswami, who actually was arrested days after this very incident, but he has already been given the bail. So that is why it has been brought to the forefront of the people that maybe the justice system in India is not really being rational and unbiased to all the people, and the more privileged people are getting it easier. They're getting it easier with the law. So the problem is that 69% of inmates in prisons are under trials. So this has been according to the 2019 data, that if, see, for example, if there are 100 people in one particular, on all the jails, for example, so just imagine that out of these 100 people, only 31 are those who are actually, they are going on they're going their, a punishment, they're actually serving their punishment or of imprisonment. And of all these 69 people, for example, as per the survey, out of 100, 69, if there are 100 total inmates, 69 are under trial, which means that the again the very allegation on these people have not yet been proved, but still they have to serve they have to actually, stay into the jail premises, and this definitely hampers their freedom of movement as well, and liberty as well, which is their fundamental right. The very reason now why 69% of inmates are there in prisons and are under trials is because the bail is not granted to them in time, due to which they have to serve months and months in the jail itself. So the reason which the authorities give for keeping the under trials in the jail is that to prevent absconding or running away or tampering with the evidence. But people are being incarcerated unnecessarily. So unnecessary and unlawful arrests are taking place. This is another big problem which is there, because like, as we know, that since the UAPA Act has been reformed and has been amended, every now and then the police officials arrest every other person on the charges of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. So that is why unnecessary and unlawful arrests are going on, and even the arrest for sedition have also risen a lot these days. So the safeguards that are available, that not to arrest if accused appears when called. So the Supreme Court says that if the accused, he's willing and he's promising enough to come to the court whenever he's called, then why do you really need to arrest this particular person? If that person is honest enough and he's completely showing up and completely attending all the procedures of the court, so there is no need to arrest this particular person, keep him into jail. And the production of accused within 24 hours should be there to the magistrate, and that is why no person should be kept in the jail beyond the period of 24 hours, and should be definitely presented to the magistrate. So once arrested, the release depends on access to legal aid, which is yet another problem in our country, and that is why it is completely determined by the privilege in India. Whoever has a better privilege will get better off and then will get a better lawyer to represent him, while others remain unrepresented for months. So then there is demand for excessive surety or local sureties by courts. Now, obviously, as we know that whenever we have to get someone bailed out, so we need to give some surety. So sometimes the surety amount is so excessive, or the local sureties are not available, or the problem of sureties occurs, due to which the bail is again hung up. So that is also something which should be made a bit more lenient. With this, let's see what do we have for news in flash. Firstly, new COVID test RT-LAMP. So as we know that we have a lot of COVID tests going on these days, like we have the RT-PCR, we have the Feluda test which is going on. So another test also which has been developed now is the RT-LAMP test. So the reverse transcriptase loop mediated isothermal amplification. So you don't really need to remember the entire name of this, just the abbreviation would work. So this technology is a one-step nucleic acid amplification method to multiply specific sequence of RNA. Basically, what you need to understand is that the RT-LAMP test is way better and faster as compared to the RC-PCR test, and also the viability and the usage of this particular test is more feasible. So that is all you need to remember in this point. Second, new species of gecko. So a new species of lizard, basically, it is the smallest kind of Indian gecko kind, which is geckonid, which is known, has been discovered in the Eastern Ghats, belonging to the genus Nemaspis. So this name should be remembered. And what is the name of this? It has been found in the Eastern Ghats. So in India, there are 45 diverse species of Nemaspis, and out of which 34 are from the Western Ghats, but this one has been found in the Eastern Ghats. So this was all for today. We hope it was a good and informative session for you all. Thank you so much for staying tuned with LawSikho.